So thanks everyone who has made it to building teams and combining skills with a little bit of new awareness that we're all growing into to support the success of you and your team. My name is Risa Shimoda. I'm Executive Director of the River Management Society, and we will introduce the rest of our group here in a minute. It's great to see folks joining, and welcome.
Hi everyone, my name is Becca Price and I'm the Communications Coordinator with the River Management Society. Every month we host the River Management Roundtables. We invite a large variety of river managers, folks that work on rivers and for rivers. And our goal is really just to facilitate an open conversation on river-related topics. And this is our second roundtable this month, so it is on workplace culture topics, and the first roundtable that we do of the month is on more technical river topics. So you're always invited and welcome, and we're glad that you're here.
And hi everyone, I'm Angie Furman, the River Training Center Coordinator for RMS. And as we delve into some of these workplace culture topics today, we just wanted to share some group agreements around respecting one another, listening to each other, acknowledging and respecting our similarities and differences, as well as speaking for ourselves. And then we also are encouraging everyone to contribute to the process here. This is a round table. These aren't super formal, so we encourage you to unmute and share your thoughts or any questions. You can also put them in the chat box as well, and we can read those out. But also keep in mind that other people might have something to say, so try to keep things relevant to the topic at hand or somewhat concise. So now I'm going to pass it to Liz.
Hi, everybody. Liz Lacy here. I know at least a couple of you who've joined us this afternoon, but I work with the National Park Service Partnership Wild and Scenic Rivers program in Southern New England, and have been working with various different teams, anywhere from my staff team to community partnership teams for the last 20 years with the Park Service, and in various river settings. And I'm joining you today just to sort of help throw some ideas into the conversation. And I guess initially what we wanted to talk about is just how teams work, and what, generally speaking, over the years in terms of building up a team, what has seemed relevant is getting people on your team who have the right kind of experience or technical experience that suit what you're working on, your projects, your organization, or whatever. For me, I know a lot of the teams that I have been a part of over the years, it's often people who have a leg up on the topic, or a leg up on some kind of access to the information and the resources that they're working on. So that's sort of been a focus of the team building, is just to try to get as many good people on the team as you can. And the good old adage of having some of the key people in your community on board, some of the people who can get the word out to others in your community and that sort of thing, who can be connected to the community that you're trying to work in, whether it be a user group community or an actual town or county or state or whatever. Do you want to go into the next? And one of the things that you know, obviously you'd want to see, and I have seen in varying levels of degree in the various teams I've worked in, is a commitment to the subject, to the resources, to the mission that you have as a group. You're hoping that your team members have commitment to it, and that's sort of like the good basis for them wanting to be on your team. They want to be respected as a member of your team and to show respect to the team in general, and to have some respect for all the different voices that might be on your team. And then there's a certain amount of accountability. Let's see. I guess I'm trying to get to my notes here. Yeah, I mean, some of the folks that are on this know what I'll be saying here is that there's a certain level of accountability that folks take on Partnership Wild and Scenic Rivers in general. We have the Park Service is a member of the committee, perhaps, or is helping out the committee. And we have folks who are appointed to the committee from outside of our being able to choose who they are. Their town or their organization has them come in and be part of the team. And some people are a little bit more accountable about the projects that we take on over the years versus others. And so you really hope that your team members are going to take their roles really seriously and really look at this as a team effort. And even if it might not be happening in their town, they'll participate and work hard on it because it's better off for the whole of the team. And next slide. So as we all know, we need to communicate in a really, really clear way and have a good structure of our work that we do so that everybody knows how they fit in and what role they play, and have the ability to have a voice in meeting the team objectives. And I think that the most important thing here is that everyone feels that they have a place and that they have a contribution to make. And it may not be the same as someone else sitting next to them, but they do have a valid contribution to the team. So those are just some ideas to throw out there. Oops, sorry. My apologies. Another voice coming into the. Do any of you, Angie, Risa, do you want to add? Well,
I'd just say that those are, to me, those are the 5 elements that you mentioned are pretty fundamental to building and managing, leading, and supporting a team. I don't know if if someone else says, oh yeah, and we also blank, always do blank, we must have such and such, you know, if there's someone else who views there's some element, be welcome to, you know, to add their suggestions in. But commitment, respect, accountability, good communication, and support are those that we are kind of pillars, if you will, or the fundamental elements of having a good team. Bruce, you manage dozens and dozens of teams. You know, you're probably the master of this compared to the rest of us. It's so many people, so many folks that you have. Any other comments? Like, oh yeah, we've got another pillar that you forgot or anything?
Yeah, don't consider yourself the master of anything. You know, I think all 5 of these are sound, and I would not, nothing, I don't feel like anything's missed here from my perspective at all.
Okay, well, thanks.
Sorry.
No, no.
No, that's okay.
Yes, I guess a good question to ask yourself when you're thinking about teamwork and building teams and working with teams is your workspace or your, yeah, essentially workspace here available to new voices. And that definitely includes your staff diversity, but it can also be your outreach to partners and partners that you work with, in addition to internally, but also externally, collaboratively. How inviting is it to different types of people that you're partnering with, or that even are within your team? And I was reading the other day, we often think about diversity as like age or gender or religion or ability. But I was reading this article that I found interesting that talked about not only trying to find people for your team that have these inherent diversities about them, but also people that have acquired diversity. So, for example, there might be someone on your team who has experience working cross-culturally, and that's something that they've acquired. And it's not necessarily, I mean, it could be inherent. Maybe they come from a household with multiple cultures in it, but thinking about things that we can also learn and acquire as well, and skills like that. So I thought that was just like an interesting side note that I haven't really thought a whole lot about inherent versus acquired diversity, but how both are really important. When thinking about diversity on your team, it can be a whole lot bigger than just, well, yeah, we've got some people of different ages and that's it. It can go a whole lot deeper. We've got a caller here that I think I might mute because we're getting some background noise. Okay, there, I think we got it.
So Lilia has a note in the chat about if we have any ideas of what to do when these good principles aren't being met. That sort of was in the background of as I was talking, is that you have these sort of ideals of what you're hoping a good team would be about. We're getting there. We're going to be moving into a discussion here where it's about really acknowledging who your team is and whether or not you're achieving what your ideals or what your goals might be in having a team. So I think some ideas will come up as we go along here, but yeah, it's like what I was alluding to in my little initial discussion is that sometimes you don't have much of a choice about who's sitting on your team, and so and how people perform on your team. And the only thing you can really do is continue to try to do exercises and such to get folks to be more aware. But that's sort of my 2 cents in that regard. But as this discussion goes further, maybe we'll come up with some thoughts on that.
I was going to say, hold the thought, Lilia's question, because we can definitely come back to that later, I think.
Yeah, and I also wanted to share, we have this little activity that we can do, and I don't know, just like a quick response maybe to Lilia's and Liz's comment is that maybe just by using different language, we can help the people within our team think about some of these concepts differently, or we can all get on like the same page. I don't know, like the Avarna group has a really good resource about like hiring and the type of language that's used in job descriptions, but even taking it back from that to like what type of language do you use amongst your team in the workplace, and getting on the same page with that could be a way to kind of bring up these ideas of diversity, and maybe getting people to think that there's more diversity in the group than initially might meet the eye as well. But I want to share this activity. I'm going to put a link into the chat here so that you can all participate. We've got this Jamboard here, and let me double check. I'm going to pause my share real quick.
This conference will now be recorded.
Sorry, I thought I was pausing my screen share. I had accidentally paused the recording, but I got it restarted. Is everyone able to get into that? Cool. I see Emma's in. All right. So if you notice, I'm going to bring you up to the top real quick just to orient everyone. Up here in the very center, there's kind of like 1 out of 4. You can expand down, and we've got a few different sheets here, but right now we're just going to be focusing on this first one. We'll be moving to the others a little later on. So you want to be on this first page, and then over on the left-hand side, you've got some tools here, and we're just going to do a matching exercise. And so you can get your pen over here. You can even change the thickness or color. This is all anonymous, but we'd like for everyone to just take a moment to try matching the word to the definition and seeing if maybe this is easy, maybe this is not. Would love to hear some comments or what you're thinking as you go through this. But you can go ahead and start. We're all going to be on the same canvas here. So you'll see I'm like drawing a little thing here in the corner. But go ahead and see if we all agree on these definitions.
This is Risa. As you're thinking about this, the connection between this and where we have been talking about teamwork is that there's some thoughts and kind of underlying principles and even definitions that are helpful to be comfortable with if in fact we're going to be providing a welcoming space to those who are working with. These are words that you hear a lot in the news, and you hear a lot with all the things that we've been going through the last couple of years. And by for me, by just seeing them in front of me, I'm thinking about the definition. It's helpful to remember how important they are and how much a part of my world, your world, our shared world they are.
So
This is
far,
awesome.
looks like everyone mostly is drawing its lines to the same, from the same words to the correlating definitions. Any questions about these definitions? Seems like everyone, for the most part, everyone's agreeing on where they go. Any thoughts or comments? Well, we'll be returning back to the Jamboard here in a second. But I think we're going to continue on, and I'm going to switch back over here to our slides.
All right, so if you haven't seen this graphic before, screenshot it and share it with somebody because it's fantastic. I know a few years back, this is actually, I always kind of used equality and equity like interchangeably. I don't think I really understood the difference. I think a lot of people do. And this illustrates really well how providing the same resources to everyone, so doing something that's equal doesn't necessarily yield an equal outcome for everyone. So here you can see there's 3 guys, they've gone to watch a baseball game, but because of their different heights, having the same resources available to them leaves one guy not even able to see the game. So essentially the kind of lesson here and the takeaway to our workspaces about equity is that we have to be observant of different needs within our workplaces or within our communities, the rivers where we work, and ensure that we are providing equitable access to resources. That might be different kinds of accommodations or adaptations. I don't know if there are examples that come to mind for folks that you might like to share. I can think of a few, but I just want to open it up if anybody has examples of equity that they'd like to share.
I was thinking about this in sort of a different light, and that is in some of the groups that we work with, we take it for granted that people are going to have either time during the day or time in the evening to spend coming to a place to meet or to take the time away from their schedule to virtually meet, as we have been during this weird time. But that not you know, looking at your team, not every, you know, or your ideal team, attracting members that you really want to be on your team, you might not be making it sort of an equitable situation for everyone in your community to actually be able to participate, because you're making assumptions about what people's schedules are and what their lifestyles are like. And so you need to think of more sort of an equity in terms of access to your group, to your team, to the projects you work on. And yeah, so it's sort of a little bit different than just maybe internal, but also just being able to attract a more diverse and meaningful array of people to your team.
One example of kind of, I don't even know if he thought of it this way, but a colleague who worked with the Utah Conservation Corps in one conversation mentioned that he has started to make a big effort to look for folks who might be a little quieter, who might be maybe a tiny bit younger than the group, and generally he was kind of on the lookout for females in the Conservation Corps group. It's physical work, it's outdoor work, and he just spent a little extra time coaching them, kind of taking them aside, encouraging them, and when when they were experienced and capable, they'd been on a few weeks of work and were very capable and confident. They didn't envision themselves to be like a team leader. And he would see guys who had the same experience, and I'm generalizing as he was, guys with the same experience who were very quick to put themselves out as a potential lead. And he said by just coaching the gals or the people who were a little bit younger, he felt like it helped level the playing field. So he had people who were equally confident, equally skilled, equally able to also then seek like the next level or the extra job or whatever.
Do we have any other, and thanks for sharing, guys. Do Any other comments or examples you'd like to share? Okay, I think we can hop back into the Jamboard exercise, and we'll go to the second page. Angie can show. We were on the first page up at the top. You can scroll to the right, and these are confusing. These are the trickiest slide, I think. But you hear a lot of these words, especially institutional and structural racism, used interchangeably. But if you will give it your best shot and just read the definitions and try and think about how they do differ, and then we can discuss it once everybody's done the matching exercise.
And again, kind of as an illustration of the equality equity thing, these are helpful things to think about when you encounter some folks in your team or those in a group that you're entering and beginning to work with who might be different, and some of the automatic assumptions that you might make just because of who you are and your past experience. That might be a reason for you're not understanding something, or someone not understanding you, someone getting frustrated with some system.
Okay, I think almost everybody has weighed in. Give this another second.
I'll just ask, because this is I guess maybe a little bit heavier than the other slide. Or any thoughts or comments about the words, the issues, what they represent, and how this relates to your building a good team?
So I guess that we were talking about this when we were planning this whole session, was that we kind of made this leap from talking about building a team, what makes a good team, to bringing in all of these sort of concepts that are a lot more on the radar these days than they have been. They've always been, but they are more so now than ever. And I think people are actively trying to seek ways of addressing them. And what you pointed out, Risa, was that there's certain language that goes along with this. And understanding the language makes you much more aware of the mechanics of this and how it plays out in your work, of either with your staff or with, working with community members and that sort of thing. So I think it's really, it's very powerful to look at the words and then to think about the broader purpose of your teams, and if your teams really represent the communities that you're working in, or if there need to be changes to your teams so that they actually do represent the communities that you're working in, or that the staff represents, all of the people that you're working with in the various communities that you work in.
I think one thing for me that was really enlightening in learning about these terms, if you haven't heard them before, is that you can then look up, once you start looking them up and you learn about policies and practices that have ostracized people and denied them access to some of the privileges that other folks have grown up with, it helps you to have more of an understanding and empathy for people and the different needs that they're going to bring to a team. So people have grown up in entire neighborhoods that just don't have the same resources, that you might have had.
Guess we could go to the next slide. So if you've been kind of proactive about not only building a team that has excellent skills and are beginning to, or perhaps you've been working on already, the context for welcoming new folks, seeking new voices, kind of integrating different elements of the backgrounds of those who work on your teams. How do we know if other people are thinking the same thing, or if how someone might be not comfortable or not used to, what might be in your current workplace but isn't going to say something, or they're reticent to challenge anything that seems maybe not great, or maybe challenge or ask about something that they're just not familiar with. So people from different contexts or different backgrounds or experiences, working together. How do you do that? I think with the other two slides that we've just been going through and going to the Jamboard, a lot of this is communication, right? And trust and supporting each other. So going back to the fundamentals, but this is sort of like workplace 201 instead of workplace 101. Asking yourself the question, even though you sort of know the answer, is the answer still the same as it was last year? Or is it the same as it was 5 years ago when I first started working here? So there's no correct answer. And if you said your team is aware of everything that it could affect your workplace, you're probably not 100% correct. You might be pretty correct, but this is all a work in progress. So one more time, if we go back to the Jamboard and go to page number 3, just another few words and concepts that are important that may not have been part of our vernacular conversation, a few years ago. The word intersectionality, for instance, that didn't even exist as a word 20 years ago. Gender identity was not something we talked about at all a few years ago. But I would say every, fourth grader now knows what gender identity is, which I can't even imagine when I was 10 years old. And also I think that to me, when Becca and Angie and I went to a certificate class, it was Greenfield Community College in Western Mass had an online DEI certificate class, and these Jamboard exercises were part of one exercise that we had. When I first saw the race, that word race, and when I saw that there were options for defining it, it took me a minute before I figured out the answer. And I think people are seeing it. But that answer isn't something that I would have used as a definition for race before our class. Anyone have any questions about this? I think people are sort of finding consensus on the words and their definitions.
I guess I would just like to add into thinking about the fact that I don't know, I've read a couple different things like Washington Post and a couple other surveys. I think something with LinkedIn. I try to find them, but they're finding that a lot of like recent graduates and people entering the workforce have a higher priority around working for someone that has that are confronting some of these things and trying to promote diversity within their workforce. And I was reading something about how like over 70% of these LinkedIn respondents place that's one of their highest priorities when finding a new job. In addition to, some other things like pay and benefits, but how they're just choosing to not work for companies that don't have a diverse workforce, that don't show commitment to having a diverse staff or serving a diverse population. So.
Yeah, I
Well,
think there are. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
no,
I
go
would
ahead.
say there's just so many different levels of awareness, and it's so hard to just assume that everyone is aware and understands this vocabulary, as we were saying earlier. And there is a big age and experience and everything else. I think some of the folks that I work with in groups, their heart's in the right place. They really want to be more sensitive to this sort of stuff, but they're just to be able to dive deep into this and look at this kind of the words and understanding the sort of subtle differences between some of the terminology, and actually then taking some of this to heart and actually making some changes in the groups that we work in. It's just there are varying levels of comfort, awareness, ability to push things forward. So it's complicated.
Hey y'all, Bruce put integrity in the chat room. Bruce, what were you thinking about when you put that in there?
There it is. I was just thinking that's what I was hearing when you were talking, the conversation about people coming into the workforce, what they're looking for, and it just resonated with my thought process of what this all speaks to as well. For me, is we want an organization that has that integrity and that part of those team components we were talking about earlier too. So just a nice buzzword, really, just to throw it in there.
Mm-hmm. Cool, thanks. Thanks for sharing that. So I think moving forward, so thanks everybody for participating and sharing. And I know the way we chose to do the Jamboard, you see a couple of people making connections between the words, and then it sort of becomes, unless you really violently disagreed with it, it kind of became a flow where people started jumping on and agreeing on the definitions. I didn't see any folks who disagreed. But hopefully that was helpful. Hopefully it was a helpful exercise. Are there any questions about, maybe we could go back to Lilia's question earlier. Lily, you want to just
yeah,
kind of...
hi. That, and also sort of following up on it, I have not had this in work, but I have in personal life where people have, going back to these definitions, which I love this exercise, that they've disagreed with these. I mean, basically, you could probably say they've got white privilege through and through. And if we've encountered that in our work situations, wow, how do we handle that? So that's sort of more specific. Going back to my original question, so what happens when these principles aren't being met? You know, yeah, that would be a blatant one.
In general, you know, in general, or there's any specific elements of it that you're thinking of? Because if you say in general, that's a big
Right.
nut to crack.
Well, so I think I've heard people push back on the institutional and structural racism ideas, saying, oh my gosh, we don't do that in America. That's ridiculous. And for those of us who think it's very inherent in our systems, how do you counter that?
Lilia, I like to comment just because I had a conversation about this with a family member, like in the last few months, and they were like, well, what do you mean when you say structural racism? And so we started talking about it, and which, you know, kind of led to a conversation about privilege, and well, that just makes me feel bad for being white, was kind of the response. And I was like, well, you know, what helped me just having had this conversation recently is to have examples. Maybe it's, you know, if it's work related examples. For me, the historical example that I referenced was redlining and how that created low income neighborhoods and poorly funded schools, low paid teachers, and there was just this economic spillover because of this one practice and policy that was in place by banks. So my advice would be, if it's something that's a problem and it's a conversation you're having, try to have examples, because there's very concrete and disputable examples of this stuff that is really educational opportunity, I think, when the opportunity arises to talk about it.
Yeah, I would agree. I think education and awareness, and if you're not sure, like maybe someone challenges something and you're not sure, you know, check it out and get back to them and say, well, I'm not sure. Because none of us are experts. None of us are experts. And so I think education and awareness, but not necessarily like by you stepping up on a soapbox and, like, you know, lecturing to somebody, because we are really all learning. And then for me, for someone who might say, so are you just trying to make me feel bad because I'm white? No, we're trying to like learn about what has happened. Stop. Now what can we do in the future? So to kind of compartmentalize understanding what has happened with what are we going to do today? You know, we have a trip to run. You know, so knowing about what happened 400 years ago isn't going to really help you that much on your trip. You know, when you got to figure out who's sweep and who's got safety and who's got the first aid kit. But having that background is helpful awareness in, you know, in when you might find someone on the trip who is different or becomes, you know, uncomfortable because they think you're different, you know, or something like that. So, but I think to be on what happens if it's not happening is to be specific about some learning or example, like Becca mentioned, that can help. The person might still feel bad, but at least they would leave the conversation with a little bit of knowledge that kind of dismantles a little bit of whatever was making them upset. I hope that makes sense. Is that making sense, Lily?
Yeah, that's great.
So I had this thought about something that was actually going on as a conversation in our staff, because, and Lilia, it's probably something that you can relate to. and if Emma were still here, she would probably get it too, is that a lot of the groups who have been getting a river in their neck of the woods designated wild and scenic, we it was like, so, we're finding that these groups are oftentimes found in sort of privileged locations, at least the partnership Wild and Scenic Rivers, privileged locations, and the groups are very similar looking. All the members are similar looking and acting and in the same sort of category. And that, we looked at sort of the study process and who was involved in the study process and who had access to some of the power and the influence. And, it was like actually dismantling a little bit the whole process of how these rivers become wild and scenic and who gets involved and why they get involved, and sort of doing an analysis of that and tracking it back to, like, how could we do this differently so that we have a different result when we do designate a river and we do have a council or a committee that's working in an area on a river. What components would we do differently? So it's sort of like breaking it down and thinking about the mechanics of it and how did it get to be where it's at, if that makes any sense.
Also, we live in a very, very political environment, as you know, but if short of that kind of judgment, if someone is like not understanding or feeling bad or not, or disagreeing with, what you might explain as a premise, it might feel at the beginning like, oh, I can't deal with this. Doesn't that person know? And then if they're entrenched and it's political, that's one thing. But if they're not, they really don't understand or they're really upset. You might if you kind of suck it up a little bit and invite them into your space and saying, let's talk about this. Maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm misinterpreting the situation, and do that a little bit. I think that might help. That might invite the conversation, so that it takes away maybe somebody feeling like they're being preached to. Because if you're the white privilege type person, I'm sure it seems like for a lot of folks, if they're in the unhappy camp, it's like they're losing ground. Something's being taken away. And when something is free and ubiquitous and just always there, and you can take it for granted because it's always there, then if you lose an inch, a milliliter of it, it seems like you've got less, unless you have a conversation, about that and how the context is changing. Oh, this is getting deep. Any other questions or thoughts about just the topic, the conversation? Yeah, as we've been saying, this is not, we're certainly not coming up with conclusions. We're not like fixing something, but understanding kind of what's swirling around in our worlds, and that it's what is changing and evolving is really different for someone who doesn't know a world without 9/11. If they're 8 years old and 9 years old, their perspective is really different than someone who's old like me. Just so different. So talking about it is very important. I guess we could go to the next slide. So we have some, like Angie mentioned earlier, we have two types of river management roundtables. The ones at the beginning of the month, the second Tuesdays, are always on the river. So more operational or perfunctory, if you will. And next month, we've gotten lots of interest in water trail maps. So we're going to be talking about those that are around, how to make them better if you're just starting yours. if you'd like to look at some others to see if there are, best practices or good tips that you could add. That will be the beginning of February. And then roughly a month from now, on the fourth Tuesday, for the second River Management Roundtable of the month, we're going to be talking about something that also was not part of our vernacular 2 years ago. Probably ought to look it up what it really meant, but land acknowledgements. And we're going to be talking about, what they're for and how people are using them. And we might even touch on, I'm not totally certain about are there instances where they're being used kind of inappropriately or without a true understanding of why everyone's talking about it. I don't know if Becca or Angie want to chime into that one.
I would just add to that Coulter Pence will be presenting, and she's presented about this with the Forest Service and National Wilderness Skills Institute and other organizations, and has a really, really phenomenal grasp of best practices and examples, and also just why it's relevant, and how to do it, where. And then she also suggested we seek specific examples from rivers. So hopefully we'll have some really concrete, just best practices to look at just for wherever you're at in the process of incorporating that into your work. So it should be really interesting, and also just a good dialogue on their relevance. So.
Yeah, I also just wanted to add in that we did record this. We record not all of these, and sometimes we don't post them, especially if they tend to be more about sharing personal information. But we definitely share all of the kind of on the water roundtables on our video channel, which you can get to by going to the Training Center webpage. We've also we've got over 50 different recordings of everything from trainings and previous roundtables that we've been doing. So highly encourage everyone to go check out all these on-demand videos. And then I also just wanted to highlight that the River Training Center has a bunch of other events coming up. We've got a webinar series going on right now about wild and scenic rivers. Our next one will be on partnership wild and scenic rivers on February 16th. And then we also have a 2-part river access planning series going on that's looking at the some of the steps outlined in the river access planning guide. And the first one of those will be on February 8th. So lots of great things going on. Highly encourage you to go check them out on the website. You can find more information about them and registering, but always feel free to reach out if you have any further questions. And just thanks again, everyone. And thanks, Liz, for helping out with this as well.
Thank you.